So, what should I do? Before you start thinking about your conclusion, ask these questions. Ask yourself before you start writing, why does this topic or argument matter to me? Like, I know that this is an assignment that you're forced to do. I know that you probably would not have chosen this topic if you could write your own. But you're making an argument in your thesis. Why might be relevant? Why is that important? Why should people think about this? Another question to ask yourself is, what do I want my reader to do, or what do I want my reader to take away from my work? What are the big ideas or big issues I'm working with? So even if this is a paper that you hate writing, there's still something that you want your audience to take away. You don't want them just to take away the fact that you're a superb and amazing writer. Like, there's a lot of superb and amazing writers. But what you want them to understand is that, like, your writing isn't just superb, your writing also motivates them. Your writing also makes them think beyond just the paper itself. You want them to apply that. Um, you want them to apply the paper topic outside of the paper. Also, how does the topic that you're writing about, how does your thesis relate to all people? How does this, like, even though you're writing this about, um, like what communities need to do, what their responsibility is for the environment, how does that relate to just like people in general? How does this relate to my reader, for example? So ask yourself these questions because then you can make better choices about the type of conclusions paragraph you could write. So you might get cranky because there are no quote unquote options to choose from. So kind of like when I showed you the different options for introductions, there are not options like that for conclusions. So it's not like, hey, choose your favorite. However, what you do have is that actually the conclusions can mirror or use the same technique as the introduction. So if I use background in my intro, then I would use background in my conclusion. So that might be something that you want to do. Oftentimes your conclusion should work with your introduction. Okay? So let's take a look at some sample conclusions. Oh, actually, before we do that, I'm going to do this. So here are things that you want to make sure that you do in your conclusion. First of all, remind us of the thesis. Yes, you should be doing that. So the thesis, it's not it's not the word for word the same as your thesis in the introduction. It should be similar, or I should be able to see the relationship between the two. I should see how they're related. Um, so it should be somewhere in your conclusion where you remind your reader of your overarching argument. You also want to reference back to the introduction. So whatever technique you used in the intro, you might want to extend or continue that in your conclusion. So if I use the incident, I might want to continue that incident, maybe finish that story, or manipulate that story a little differently to connect it to the introduction. I also need to make sure that I connect my thesis to broader issues. So, like, this is where the overarching so what is important. Why is this important? Why have someone read about what a community should do for the environment? So, what are you wanting your audience to be encouraged to do? So, remind them of the thesis, utilize or reference back to your introduction, and make sure that you give your reader an overarching so what. Why is this topic, this paper, these ideas in this paper, why is this relevant to your audience's life outside of the paper?